My friend Leo appeared in the doorway of the house, followed by the woman from the custody service. She said I would have 3 fathers now. What? Then 2 twins, who looked to be in their 20s, came out to us. Leo introduced them. These were Toby and Mike, his best friends, and they would also be my guardians. Did I get adopted by 3 people? Was that even possible? However, the guys immediately invited me to lunch. I was very hungry, but there was only instant noodles on the table. And I remembered how my mother used to cook. A lump rose in my throat. A couple of months ago, my parents died in a car accident. Everyone was saying that I needed to move on with my life, but how? The children from the orphanage did not accept me. I was withdrawn and shy, and when I thought that nothing good would happen in my life, my old friend Leo wrote to me. I had been running an Instagram page for a long time, and there I pour my heart out in posts. Once he subscribed to me and we began to communicate. Despite the difference of 4 years, it was always very easy with him. He was the only person who understood me, and he was so naive and kind, just like a child. When Leo found out about my tragedy, he urged me to move on with my life and try to go to the medical school I had so longed for. And indeed, it turned out that my parents left me savings to pay for college. But alas, according to the law, only the guardians who would adopt me could get them. Leo cryptically replied that he knew how to help. He had his own house, so he could take over custody. God, Leo, are you serious? And now I was sitting in the kitchen and I couldn't believe that Leo and I had made it. But 3 guardians were too much, of course. But come on, I decided to thank Leo and start by washing the dishes. But Leo decided to help me. Guys don't like washing dishes, do they? He was humming a tune, and I was embarrassed to say that he had a very pleasant voice. Leo smiled. He wanted to record his song for a long time, but his guitar was broken, and he didn't have enough money for the one he dreamed of. It was expensive. Lowering his eyes, he said that they were now on a tight budget, but he added that I would not need anything. Oh, Leo, for me the main thing is that you are near. I fell asleep with a feeling that I was in my place, but in the morning, as soon as I opened my eyes, the twins burst into the room with a phrase that today I would clean the house according to the schedule. This wasn't how I imagined my first day in a new family, but I quickly gathered myself. After all, the guys took me in. I was dusting when I found a bag of balloons under the table. They seemed to know it was my birthday tomorrow. I smiled, but there was a knock on the door. A loader was standing in the doorway with a huge box. New TV? Wow, it could cover half of the wall and had a camera. And Leo said they didn't have much money. The twins fussed and said that they didn't have money. And Mike had won this TV in the lottery. Wow, cool. What a lucky guy. During the cleaning, the day passed unnoticed, and before I went to bed, I was already looking forward to Leo and the guys congratulating me in the morning. However, this did not happen. Confused, I went down to breakfast and heard the twins loudly discussing some party. Wow. So there would also be a surprise party? I pretended not to hear anything. I wanted to go for a walk, but the twins suddenly blocked my path. What happened? Toby handed me the money and a list of groceries. And Mike said I needed to buy them all, and quickly. I was in shock. Did they send me out for groceries on my own birthday? I was so taken aback that I couldn't argue. In the store, it turned out that the most expensive products were on the list. Not everyone could afford them. But I immediately checked myself. The guys were trying for me. Anticipating the fun, I dragged my bag home and opened the door. But there were already a bunch of strangers hanging out in the room. Looked like the twins were going to announce that I was the birthday girl. But Toby just barked that everyone was already hungry, and I could go to my room and let them hang out. Wait, wasn't this a holiday for me? Tears of resentment welled up in my eyes. Had Leo forgotten about me too? I didn't expect that from him. Depressed, I went to my room and suddenly heard my name. I listened. Mike was bragging to his brother Toby. I would have taken someone under guardianship before if I knew how much money it would bring. We'll take all her money, and then we'll find a new victim, he said. What? The front door slammed. It was Leo. He immediately came up to me and shyly handed me a box with a large bow. I quickly opened it and could not believe my eyes. There was a microscope. This was the one I needed to get into college. Unable to contain my emotions, I rushed to Leo, and he gently hugged me and goosebumps ran through my body. Leo asked anxiously why I was so sad on my birthday. I hesitated and timidly replied that it looked like the twins were spending the money my parents had left me, but Leo's face changed. And he added that the twins were his best friends. They would never do that. I was so hurt. Why don't you believe me? Then Mike and Toby appeared on the steps. They seemed to have heard everything. Just looking at them made a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I pushed Leo away and ran to my room. Guys stole from me. I had to report it to the police. I picked up the phone with trembling hands. Damn, my hands are shaking. They pounded on my door and soon there was a loud crunch. Toby broke the flimsy latch. He grabbed my phone and shouted that if I wanted to complain about something I would regret. Guests began to flock to my room. It looked like they heard something. Oh, teenage whims. Toby told them sarcastically. He left, and I was still shaking. I couldn't go outside. The twins were just playing video games in the living room. Yes. That's right, the console. The new TV had a camera. If I could record their conversation, it would serve as proof for Leo. For the next half day, I tried to get timing right when the twins wouldn't be watching TV. Then I heard them go into the kitchen to get some chips. I didn't have much time, so I immediately went down to the TV and turned on the camera with trembling hands. I think it worked. All I had to do was sneak back to my room. What are you doing here? Suddenly I heard above me. I was stunned. Twin Mike was standing very close. He continued, "We'd rather you buy us something else with your money instead of just hanging around." So he didn't understand what I was doing here. I glanced at the camera. The light was on, and the recording was still going on. The guys were happy and discussed their new life at my expense. I felt elated. Soon Leo would know the truth. I knew that he would support me and protect me. Just like my dad did. Tears welled up in my eyes again. As soon as Leo returned, I immediately pulled him to the TV in anticipation. I turned on the recording. Mike was already on the screen. I froze, and suddenly, black screen. I was stunned. "Leo, it looks like the camera's turned off. I'm not lying to you." But Leo only said sadly that he was very disappointed. How could I say these lies about his best friends? Lowering his eyes, he added that he had a very different opinion of me. I had a terrible sinking feeling. The person closest to me thought I was a liar. The next morning, the twins made me wash all their shoes, and when Toby saw a spot on his sneaker, he yelled that if it wasn't for the money, they would have thrown me out for sure. Suddenly, I heard someone moving in the corridor. I was desperate. In tears, I wandered into the bathroom to wash his sneakers. Why do I need all this? Even Leo doesn't believe me. Suddenly, Leo came into the bathroom. It turned out that he had returned for the wallet and had heard everything. Leo started to apologize for not believing me right away, and then he added that now he would never let me offend, but we needed proof. Then the brothers would be deprived of their guardianship rights. "Leo, I won't let you down this time. All I wanted was to win back his trust." Surprisingly, I felt more than just gratitude for him. Leo helped set up the camera on the TV, and we waited for the brothers. As soon as they entered, I blurted out, "Why did you take custody of me if you wanted a slave?" Toby just grinned at me. I could not prove anything. "Yes, of course. Let's see." We checked. Everything was recorded this time. In the morning, Leo said that the four of us were going to the amusement park in honor of my last birthday and winked at me. The guys jumped in the back of the car, and Mike immediately started making stupid jokes about me. But Leo snapped at him to apologize immediately. The boys yelled in disgust. At that moment, we were approaching the police station. Toby's twin immediately rushed to the car door handle, but I managed to block it. The police were already approaching us, and while the surprised brothers were being handcuffed, Leo handed the sheriff a flash drive with the video. As we watched the twins go, Leo turned to me, looked me in the eye, and gave me a gentle hug. Then he added that we could finally live together. I felt my cheeks turn red. I was the happiest person on the planet that night. The twins were deprived of their rights to my custody, and they were obligated to pay the money spent. Leo and I were so happy about it. I started a new life. But alas, the joy was not long. A few days later, we got a call from custody saying that due to a legal accident, Leo could no longer be my guardian. Tomorrow I would be picked up by a new guardian from another city. This was the end. All night, I could not find a place. After all, I was losing a dear person again. Tears were choking me, but I suddenly realized that I just had to thank Leo for everything. I got up early and immediately rushed to the music store. I was supposed to meet Leo for the last time in an hour. And when I saw him, I couldn't help but cry. He seemed broken too. With trembling hands, I handed Leo the guitar he'd been craving. Leo was taken aback and tried to refuse the gift, but I tried to smile through my tears and said that he was the dearest person in my life, and I wanted him to remember me. Leo was calm and silently smiled. What? Leo, don't you care? Suddenly, someone touched me on the shoulder. I almost jumped in surprise. A young man was standing nearby. He said he was my new guardian and nodded to Leo. What does it mean? Leo gently wiped away my tears and told me I shouldn't have worried so much. It turned out that my new guardian was an acquaintance of his. Having learned that he could be deprived of guardianship, had a deal with him that no one else would take me away. It turned out that he would only be my guardian according to documents, and I would live with Leo, but not officially. I burst into tears of happiness. Leo hugged me and whispered softly that first I had to pretend that my guardian was taking me away, so that the guardianship service would not suspect anything, and in the evening, he would pick me up. I replied jokingly, "Alright, Daddy, goodbye, I love you." Did you like the video? Then subscribe and like it. Support the channel, thank you. The principal of the orphanage led me to two guys who were holding hands. He said it was Sam and Mark, my new dads. I tried to look surprised, as if seeing them for the first time. After all, this was all part of our plan with the guys. The principal handed over my documents to the fathers, and I got into the smart sports car of my friends, Handsome Sam and Brutal Mark. We were in the car, and I was so happy. I broke out of the orphanage, and now I was free. Since childhood, I remembered only a strict schedule, the same uniform, and the most terrible thing, the minute-by-minute supervision of the teachers. How I dreamed of immersing myself in a life full of freedom, expensive things, and parties. But time passed, and I was still stuck in the orphanage. And when I was desperate, I met two guys on the internet, Mark and Sam. They had been best friends since childhood, even sharing a Facebook account. Mark was so bold, so brutal, but Sam was a handsome guy, every girl's dream. We texted for hours, and I could only envy their life. Cool clubs, expensive clothes. And so, 2 weeks ago, when I was once again yelled at by the teachers, I called Mark and Sam in tears. I was saying I hated this place, and then Sam said he thought he had an idea. His lawyer friend would forge their marriage registration papers, and he and Mark would pretend to be a couple and adopt me. Then I would be able to leave the orphanage. And now our plan had succeeded. Now I was heading in a cool car straight to a new life. But then Mark braked abruptly. Have we arrived? Wow, what a house! It was a real castle with a pool on the roof. As soon as we were inside, Handsome Sam handed me a golden card. Are you sure this is for me? He added that it was an unlimited card. I started thinking, was it just like that? Although we were friends. I was going to run to the mall right now and buy everything there, but just as I was out in the yard, Mark yelled at me to be home for dinner. He wanted to talk to me. Come on, I'll make it. I didn't know where to look first in the store. There were so many cool things here. After shopping, I went to a restaurant and ordered the most expensive dishes. God, I've never eaten so good. I was so carried away that I didn't get home until late in the afternoon. I completely forgot about the dinner Mark was talking about. But Mark immediately complained that we were already late for the case. I stared at him in surprise. What kind of case was this? Oh yes, I remember something like that. Brutal Mark and Handsome Sam looked at each other maliciously. I didn't understand anything. Then Sam said coldly, "It's time for you to find out about our business." The tone made me feel creepy. The guys gathered around me and quietly said that they earned money from thefts. So that's where they got the money. Mark added that they had been in the business for a long time, and for new robberies, they needed someone small and agile, just like you. Handsome Sam said slowly. Was this a joke? But the guys fled with each other to tell me that I would have so much money that I could buy anything I wanted. I thought about it. I realized that I was in trouble and there was no way back. Or rather, there was, but it led to the orphanage. Then Handsome Sam chuckled. Look, you're thinking, you're not all that right. Yes, of course. I hated the rules with all my heart. Besides, who didn't want easy money? So guys, I'm in. At midnight, we got in the car. We're going to rob a jewelry store today, Handsome Sam said. Wow, this was really crazy. I played along with the guys and was just in shock from what was happening. And then Brutal Mark turned to me in a terrible bull mask. Handsome Sam handed me similar to it. He said it was their thing and it was necessary for conspiracy. I immediately pulled it over my head, and at that moment, I experienced a strange feeling, a sense of freedom. I liked that feeling. I didn't obey anyone, not even the law. We got out of the jewelry store, and I looked around in amazement. This was the coolest part of the city. They were just nuts. But Brutal Mark abruptly told me to focus. I needed to get inside the store and open the door for them from the inside. But how? Handsome Sam said they'd thought it all out. There was ventilation above the jewelry room. I would get into the room through it. That's it? You can be sure I can handle it. I kept getting into the taste. While the guys unscrewed the gate around the corner of the building, I looked at the window. What gorgeous diamonds. But Mark called out that everything was ready, and I went over to them. The ventilation system stank wildly. How gross. But I whispered to Sam that after the case, I could pick up any earrings. This was my dream. So, despite my disgust, I went inside anyway. I couldn't get enough air from the cramped space, and suddenly something furry ran down my arm. God, the rat! I flinched and touched a ventilation hatch underneath me. It opened and I immediately fell down. No! I managed to grab something and hung right over the shop floor. I looked down, and I noticed red laser arm lines all over the room. God, if I brush against them, we're dead. I frantically looked around the room and noticed a nearby sofa for visitors. There were no rays there. I hoped I was strong enough. I swayed and jumped on it. Oh God. I was just like a real spy. Then I crawled past the lasers to the door and opened the lock. Bruno went to the alarm panel, entered some password, and the lasers in the hall went out. They were really pros. Then he shoved it back into my hands and told me to go to the cash register to take out the money, and they would take care of the shop window. Wow, I opened the cash register and was finally overwhelmed by a wave of delight. Damn, I'm so cool. And now, it's all ours. But then I looked up and saw that Mark had touched the shop window, and a second later, the alarm went off. It seems they then turned everything off. Let's get out! Mark shouted in exasperation. The euphoria and romance left me abruptly, and I was just numb at the thought of being taken to prison. Sam grabbed me and dragged me to the car. We drove at full speed, and I still couldn't catch my breath. We were on the verge of going to jail. I couldn't sleep a wink all night. I needed to get out of here before I ended up in jail. I quickly began to pack my things in my backpack, and I would take that bag of money from the jewelry store. I almost died because of it. I crept into Mark's room and started looking for it. Man, where's the bag? I accidentally hit a tin can and it clattered under the bed. God, if Mark woke up now, I would be dead. I pressed myself against the wall, but I think I was okay. And then I noticed the handle of the bag. I grabbed it and crawled to the door. Freedom was only a few steps away. I opened the door. That's it. Done. Yes. Suddenly I heard Mark's voice behind me. Then he grabbed my arm. I tried to explain myself as I went along, but Mark said angrily that if I tried to run away, they would turn me into the cops as a criminal. What? How dare you? Mark pressed me against the wall and continued. They would say that since my arrival, valuable things had started to disappear from the house. And who would they believe? Them or a hooligan girl from an orphanage? I wanted to cry from impotence. He threw me into the room and said we had a new case tonight. We would clean out the fashion store. The guys locked me in my room for the day. It was unbearable. In the evening, Mark dragged me back to the car. There were tears in my eyes. This was not the freedom I dreamed of. We drove up to the store and Mark said I should spray paint the cameras, and if I tried to do something, they would hurt me. Brutal Mark easily opened the lock, and we went into the store. Wow, there are such huge balls here. I glanced at the door, but Mark pushed me sharply toward the cameras. I waited for the Brutal Mark to move away and began waving my hands at the camera. I wish someone would notice me and save me. But then Sam turned around and asked me how I was doing. I frantically began to spray paint on the camera, and then I got an idea. What if I just pretended to paint over the cameras? Then the guys would be spotted and put in jail, and I wouldn't have to help them anymore. I only needed to choose the moment and pull off their masks. Then the camera would capture their faces. So I did. The guys were so busy raking money out of the cash register that they didn't even notice anything. There was no time to delay, so I jumped up to Handsome Sam and was about to pull off his mask when he suddenly twisted my arm. I screamed at the sharp pain, but he covered my mouth. And at that moment, Handsome Sam noticed that the cameras were not painted over. He was furious. Oh no, they understood. I ran for the exit, but Brutal Mark blocked my path.
My heart was pounding. Brutal Mark angrily hissed that I decided to set them up for the second time, and they did not forgive this. And then I noticed an alarm button on the wall. I reached out and pressed it, but nothing happened. The next thing I knew, Mark was grabbing me and tying me up, and then taping my mouth shut. The guys dragged me to the car through the back door and threw me in the trunk. I was sitting in the trunk. Awesome. My freedom ended before it even started. Apparently, it served me right. I played too much and crossed the line, and they would probably dump me in some lake somewhere. My sad thoughts were interrupted by the sharp sound of sirens. It was the cops. The button worked. I heard one of them approach the guys and ask something, but Sam innocently replied that they had just arrived. I pounded on the trunk door as hard as I could, but no one heard me. Judging by the footsteps, the cops were already leaving. Heck, I braced myself and kicked the inside of the taillight. It worked! I knocked it out and managed to stick my hand through the hole from the taillight. The guys had already started the car. Sam pulled away and we drove off. Everything inside me collapsed. Now it was definitely over. Images from the orphanage began to flash through my mind, and for a moment, I even felt warmer in my heart. Heck, I would give anything to have everything back as it was. Suddenly, the car turned sharply somewhere and stopped. What happened? Someone opened the trunk and I was immediately blinded by the light of a flashlight. No, don't touch me, I shouted. It was the cops. Looks like I just got lucky. But at the police station, one of the cops came up to me and said cheerfully, "Well done. You know the first rule of kidnapping. Knock out the taillight from the inside and call for help." He saw me, went after the car, and saved me from Mark and Sam. It turned out that the cops had been looking for these bull gang robbers for a long time. Then I burst into tears. Was this nightmare finally over? Was I really free? A week later, I came to the court to give evidence. I breathed a sigh of relief when I heard that Mark and Sam were going to jail. At the exit, the teacher from the orphanage was waiting for me. I was wildly happy to see her and rushed to hug her. She was extremely surprised by my behavior. You know, during this adventure, I realized that freedom was not fashion boutiques, earrings, and certainly not crimes. Being free means learning responsibility and appreciating what you already have. Think about it. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.
I was walking through a cold hospital room. There were covered bodies everywhere and a strange smell. Another turn, and here is the office I needed. I went inside, nodded to the head doctor, and confidently put the envelope with the money on the table. For this, he grinned and handed me a bundle of death and adoption papers. Great. I quickly left the hospital, got into the car, and soon I was in the building of the Social Assistance Fund. A client was waiting for me there. I gave her the documents, and a few minutes later, she came back and handed me an envelope with the money. Wow, it was a real dream job. My scheme works like this. I buy documents for conditionally dead children. They either went missing or ran away from the orphanage and were not found. And then I pass them off as living, having forged documents. I sell these documents to clients, and the state pays them cash benefits for allegedly adopted children, and I get a good percentage. Many people would judge me, but I'm not ashamed. The thing is, my dad died a few years ago. All my life, my father honestly worked for the state to feed us, but he got cancer. He needed an expensive surgery, but the state didn't give us a cent. We had no mother and then our dad died. So I decided, if the authorities didn't care about my family, then I was not going to live according to their laws. And soon I learned that the state pays a considerable amount for the adoption of a child. That's when I came up with the scam. I found lists of children who were already formally dead and quickly adopted several dead people. However, I quickly realized that I could not adopt all the children myself. The civil services might suspect something, but I could not give up the gold mine. I started looking for girls who were willing to line their pockets from it. And so, after another transaction, I was driving home with a wad of money. I'm going to be a millionaire so soon. When I pulled up to my cottage, I saw a cop standing at the door. He was holding the hand of some dirty boy. Might have got the wrong house. But when the police officer saw me, he asked for my name, was happy, and said that the patrol had found my son Peter at the border. I didn't understand anything, but then I remembered among my first adoptees was a certain Peter. He was listed as missing. But my friend, the head doctor, easily made documents for him. I pretended that everything was fine and overcame my disgust for the ragamuffin, took his hand, and with a forced smile, began to thank the policeman for his help. After that, I quickly pushed my pseudo-son into the house and began to find out what he wanted from me. Why the hell did he resurrect? But little Pete said he wasn't happy to see me either. It turned out that 6 months ago, he ran away from the orphanage to go to friends in Mexico. He would have been there by now, but they caught him. I got into trouble. I needed to get rid of him as soon as possible. So, orphanages, border guards, and everyone else love money. It should work. I took a pack out of the safe and shoved it at Pete. Give it to the border guards and keep it for yourself, of course. But Pete said that the bribe was a lame plan, and that he needed an adult to help him officially cross the border. What a smart ass. I wanted to throw him out of the door, but he seemed to know. I wasn't telling him something. He said that if I refused to help him, he would tell the policeman that I was not his foster mother. Little bugger. I tried to calm him down. I didn't want to go to jail. All right. I'll take him to the border quickly and straight back. With a sigh, I went back to the car and got behind the wheel. Pete jumped into the next seat and we drove off. To get rid of the kid as quickly as possible, I decided to take the shortcut to the border and drove through the canyon. Pete didn't say a word the whole way. I was surprised. Could children be so calm? I was also silent. What should I talk about with a kid? And then when we were passing by the canyon, I heard a strange sound and the car started to shake. I slowed down, then got out of the car. Damn it. The right wheel was broken. I wanted to call a tow truck, but there was no network. Stupid canyon. But there had to be a town ahead. We left the car and walked down the highway. Pete wanted to support me, but I told him to shut up. It was all his fault. After an hour, I was terribly tired, my body ached, and I was terribly thirsty from the stiffness. It was late in the afternoon when we arrived at a miserable little town that looked more like a village. I hoped there was somewhere to stay for the night. I told Pete I'd pay for our hotel room, and in the morning, we would go to the border by the first bus. I started to look for my wallet, but then I realized I'd left it in the car. This was the last straw. Where were we going to sleep now? I didn't have the strength anymore, so I sat down on the ground and started crying. Pete called me a wimp and went to the nearest house to ask for a place to sleep. God, how humiliating. I'm not going to be a beggar. But it was already dark and I was getting cold. I had to split on my pride and go after Pete. We knocked on all the houses, and finally we were lucky. An old woman let us spend the night in her hut. And how miserable it was. Shabby walls all around us, and there was not even a bed in the room. It's just like when I was a kid. My dad worked like hell to provide for us, but we still lived in a poor shack. I lay down on the floor, but I couldn't sleep. Pete glared at me as I tossed and turned. And then he was gone. Hey, where are you going, kid? He came back a few minutes later with a couple of sacks and some hay, explaining that he had taken them in the old woman's barn. Pete hastily filled the bags and put them on the floor, saying that it would be more convenient for us. Wow, this Pete was a handy guy. Pete admitted that he would like to live like a normal teenager, but there was no help within reach. His words passed through me, just as I had thought after my father's death. Surprisingly, I had something in common with this boy. I immediately fell asleep on the soft mat, but after a couple of hours, I felt someone shaking my shoulder. What's wrong? Pete explained that we were late for the bus. The owner of the hut said that it was leaving in less than an hour. Oh shit! We ran through the city. I had never run so fast in my life. But then a bus stop appeared in the distance, and next to it was a clunker that looked like a truck. It turned out that the locals considered it a bus. The back of the truck was already packed to the brim, with chicken cages, mixed in with people. There's no way I was going. But Pete cheerfully climbed into the back of the truck and held out his hand, and he said that there was no other way out. Heck. Holding my nose, I climbed into the truck, and with a huge crash, we went along the highway. It was terrible to ride in the back of the truck. We were bouncing along on every bump, and a suffocating stench was coming from the chickens. Peter tried to distract me and started telling me stories about his escape. At first, I didn't want to listen to this nonsense, but Pete was joking, and how could he not be embittered by such a hard life? I supported him and told him about my dad, and how cruelly he had been treated by the government. Peter listened sympathetically, and at some point, I even felt relieved. Finally, someone understood me. Maybe not all children in the world were so terrible. Then I noticed that the shaggy man was looking at me impudently. He caught my eye and paid me a vulgar compliment. How dare he? I immediately told him off. But the brute was furious. The man began to approach me. Hey, that's enough. We were going so fast that it was impossible to jump off, and the nasty bumpkin already stretched out his dirty hands to me. This was the end. But suddenly Pete stood between us and asked the man to leave me alone. And in one motion, he knocked him down. I was shocked. How did he know such techniques? Pete replied that the orphanage had taught him to stand up for himself. Wow. This guy would be fine, but at the same time, I realized that this boy didn't seem to have a normal childhood at all. Suddenly, the truck braked sharply and all the passengers fell to the floor. What happened? Then an angry driver came up to us and told Pete and me to get out of the truck. Wait, we were defending ourselves, but the village driver didn't care. He got back behind the wheel and drove off quickly, leaving us in some backwater. I was desperate. How are we going to get to the border now? But then I noticed a sign. It turned out that it was only a couple of miles away. Pete cheered up and said that his friends in Mexico were probably waiting for him. With the last of our strength, we trudged forward along the road. At one of the turns, we saw some skinny children in ragged clothes. I tried to turn away, but suddenly I was thinking I'd always been annoyed by these kids before. But now I suddenly felt painfully sorry for them. I went up to them and asked them where their parents were. One boy replied in a weak voice that there were no parents. They were all orphans. I was like being stabbed with a dagger. Thanks to the scams, I quickly became rich. But in the end, I spent everything on some trinkets. But this money could help other children who had more problems than I had. Take Peter at least. Then I looked back and realized that Pete had disappeared. Where the hell could he have gone? In a panic, I asked the guys, did they see where he ran? But they just shrugged their shoulders. I ran on, trying to find out from the occasional passerby if they'd seen Pete. And suddenly a local remembered that he had seen a boy captured by Big Man on the local gang. God, it could be Pete. He pointed to an abandoned shack deep in the canyon. The gang's lair. Most likely, he was dragged there. Before I could finish listening, I rushed there and round around the shack on all sides. In one of the windows, I saw Pete. He was already being approached by some beefy types with batons. Oh shit! I hesitated. I didn't have to risk my life for Pete because he wasn't my son. But he had done so much for me. And now he was in trouble. Why was I standing? I had to act quickly. In a desperate rush, I jumped through the window and pushed one of the jocks standing at the entrance. Run, Pete! Pete took advantage of the moment and immediately ran for the door. I ran after him, but one of the big guys grabbed me. And then I saw Pete. He quickly hit the big guy with a board and we ran away as fast as we could. In the evening, we continued our way to the border, and here we were. Finally, there was an awkward pause as Pete looked down, embarrassed, and thanked me for my help. And I suddenly realized that I didn't want to break up. I had become so attached to Pete during this time. I hugged him tenderly and burst into tears. We had been through so much together. Pete almost seemed to be crying too. But we both knew that any journey always comes to an end. I watched Pete go until he was out of sight. I hoped that everything would be fine for him, and he would definitely be happy. It was time for me to get back into my life. And I thought how to change it now. I got home safely. There was a lot of money in the safe, but I wasn't happy about it anymore. I felt more alone than ever. Suddenly, someone rang the doorbell. Could it be Peter? I suddenly thought, and I was glad of this thought and ran to the door. But it was just a delivery guy. And then an idea came to me. And what if I adopted a child? Only this time, they would be very much alive. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you. The judge said that the decision was made and gavelled. That day, I adopted my boyfriend, Joe. We both had to stop ourselves from laughing. He really didn't have a mom. She died 2 years ago in some sort of bathroom accident. We went out on the street and Joe happily announced that I was now his mom, and we burst out laughing. Since childhood, I adopted risk and dangerous challenges. It was boring to live without it. I tried to find an extreme sports fan like me, but Joe was so crazy that sometimes it was scary. But I definitely wasn't bored with him. Therefore, our relationship quickly turned into a plain chicken. You know, we did everything. I once even walked without a safety net on the wire between the skyscrapers. And he, for example, could eat a live frog. Now, Joe asked me to adopt him as a dare. If I got through a month and was a good mom, I could give Joe the next task. But if one of us refused the challenge, they would have to walk naked all over the city, and I really didn't want that. After the adoption challenge, we went to a coffee shop to celebrate, and Joe offered to live together since I was his new mom now. I agreed. At first, we hung out all the time and I loved it. I had been wanting to move out of my parents' house for a long time, but every day Joe was acting more and more strangely. When I did yoga, he would sit next to me and watch. I was cooking in the kitchen. He was sitting silently at the table. Even when I lingered in the bathroom, he would knock softly on the door and say, "I think it's time for mommy to go out. Joe misses you." Oh no, Joe, you won't be able to get me off balance. I won't fail the challenge. One morning, I was getting ready for work and had just opened the door from my room when I saw Joe sitting in front of it. He was looking at me. I smiled and was about to leave when Joe grabbed my leg and told that mom should stay at home with her son. I didn't know. Joe was such a good actor. I played along, hugged him gently, and said, "Joe, mommy needs to earn you some candy bars." Then he turned away and said viciously that I was acting just like his dead mother. I didn't think it was funny anymore. I ran quickly down the stairs, and I thought I heard Joe crying somewhere behind me. Flying into the office, I ran into my friend Eve. She suggested we go to the bar tonight. Yes, a little relaxation would definitely help. Joe was beginning to bother me. At the bar, even I talked to the bikers. The guys offered to give us a ride. Oh yes, that's what I need. We left the bar. I got on one of the bikes with a big guy, and the race started. We raced through the city, and I felt happy. Not for long though. When I pulled out my cell phone, I saw 35 missed calls from Joe. Damn, what if something happened? I immediately asked the biker to take me home. As I entered the hall, I saw Joe sitting in the dark on the stairs. He slowly stood up and began to approach me. I was scared, and he stared into my eyes and clenched his fist. He hissed that mommy shouldn't be home so late. I answered him with disbelief. "You're out of your mind because of this challenge." But Joe suddenly grabbed my hand and squeezed it so hard that I screamed. I thought he was going to break it. But Joe jerked back and almost burst into tears. He began to apologize for being selfish, and his mother was right to scold him for it. What? I didn't scold anyone. Joe vowed to be better and trudged back to his room, constantly repeating the words, "Mom, sorry." I locked myself in and decided to dial Eve. I felt uneasy and decided to tell her all about Joe's antiques. Eve said it sounded like Joe really had some kind of mental problem. This was no longer a simple challenge. She advised me to leave as soon as possible. Who knows what else he might be capable of? Her words made me uneasy. I used to think Joe was just good at acting, but now I was starting to doubt it. I knocked on Joe's door. Silence. Summoning my resolve, I said that we would need to finish this game. I was terribly worried, and I was waiting for him to tell me that I would have to go naked all over the city. But Joe suddenly opened the door and started hugging me. "Joe, what are you doing? Mommy, don't go. Don't leave Joe alone." He continued. Then I put my hand on his shoulder and said softly, "Joe, this is just a game. You're worrying too much." But then Joe stopped talking and pulled away. A sinister smile slowly spread across his face. "Joe, stop it. This isn't funny anymore, okay?" I was about to leave when Joe grabbed my arm and whispered that I was a bad mom. "Let me go." I broke free and ran out of the room, heading for the stairs. I kept looking back at the distraught Joe. He followed me slowly. I was running downstairs, but suddenly I tripped and fell down. My vision went dark. I woke up in my bed. I was wearing a nightgown and Joe was carefully adjusting the blanket. I half froze. But he looked at me intently and put me back down. "I'll take care of mommy," Joe said slowly. The words sent a shiver down my spine. With a trembling voice, I asked for water. When he left, I frantically searched for my phone. Fortunately, it rang on the nightstand. I saw the number on the screen. It was Eve. But before I could pick up the phone, I heard Joe's voice. Well. He came over, took the cell phone, and threw it at the wall. The impact made me wince. If Joe broke my phone so easily, what could he do to me? Then Joe whispered that mommy should think about her behavior. Then he went out and the key turned in the lock. Joe locked me up. I immediately ran to the door and started pounding on it with my fists and pulling on the handle, but to no avail. Can I escape through the window? But then I noticed that Joe had taken the handles off the windows. I started to panic, and suddenly I heard the roar of an engine. Eve's car appeared under the windows. She got out of the car and rang the doorbell. This was my chance to escape. I knocked on the window and actively waved my hands. Come on, Eve, look up. At that moment, Joe came out to Eve, smiling. Eve was worried about why I wasn't picking up the phone, but Joe said in a sweet voice that I wasn't feeling well and I was sleeping. I was banging on the window and I was hoping that Eve would look up after all, but she just shrugged her shoulders and went to the car. I felt doomed. Help me! I yelled in hysterics. Suddenly, the door to the room opened. Joe grabbed me by the hair and dragged me to the bed and handcuffed me, saying that his mother was behaving very badly. I screamed and struggled, but Joe just patted my head and told me that soon mommy would calm down and he would live again as before and always be together. Joe came out and I was still twitching and screaming for help. I wanted to cry. I loved extreme sports, but this was too much. What should I do? Joe was a real nutcase. He didn't play, but then an idea came to me. What if I played along? When Joe came to check on me, I told him I'd figured it out. Mom promises to take care of Joe if he will be obedient and take the handcuffs off. My voice was shaking and my heart was ready to jump out of my chest. Joe thought for a moment, then finally released me and ordered me to feed him. Oh my god, it really worked. We went to the kitchen and I started making him porridge. I looked at Joe and gave him a tight smile. Then I handed him a plate. Joe was very happy, but as soon as he tasted the porridge, he got terribly angry, threw the plate into the wall, and started shouting at me, "You're making porridge with lumps again." I was so scared. Joe, this is the first time I've made it. But he stared at me and told that mommy had already made Joe's porridge with lumps. They then had a big fight. His mom fell down and fell asleep in the bathroom forever. What? Fell asleep? Then Joe got up from the table and started walking towards me. Damn, and then I realized Joe had killed his mother. I blurted out that I was going to the bathroom. There I closed the flimsy latch and looked around. Damn it. I had to get out of here. Then I noticed a small window near the ceiling. I tried to open it, but at that moment, the door creaked. Joe was rushing to me, saying in a crazy voice that mom was too late again. In a fit of hysteria, I tried to smash the window with a mop, but at that moment, Joe burst in and started shouting. He wanted mommy to play with him. Tears welled up in my eyes. That's it. I'll never get out of here, unless... Then I hugged Joe with trembling arms. Mommy had already made up a game for us. Joe, you're a brave boy, aren't you? He nodded thoughtfully. Prove it to your mom. Take a walk on the ledge of the roof for your mom. Can you? In horror, I waited for his answer, but he was suddenly happy and agreed. Joe climbed out of the window and onto the ledge, and I watched him. Come on, Joe. Mommy is proud of you. He looked at me with a smile, and I immediately closed the window and ran downstairs. Without looking back, I hurried to the police station. Tears streamed down my cheeks. The cops listened to me, and we drove back to the house. But when we entered, I was speechless. Joe was covered in bruises and torn clothes. At the sight of the police, he began to cry and pointed at me. Please don't give me to her. Joe complained that I adopted him just to mock him and even made him walk on the ledge. I interrupted him and started shouting, "No way, don't believe him. He wanted to kill me." I was so hurt. Of course the cops believed Joe. He played so well. They said that I was deprived of the right to custody and took me to the police station. When they let me go, I went to see Eve. I flinched at every sound, afraid that Joe would attack me, but Joe was gone, and he didn't even show up for the trial, where I was fined and given community service. On the last day of my punishment, I returned to Eve with the news that I was moving to another city. I admitted that no matter where I was afraid every day that Joe would attack me down there.
And now I have been living a normal life without adrenaline for 6 months, and I gradually forget those terrible events.
I have a job, an apartment, and even a new boyfriend. I was just on my way to a date when I stopped at a traffic light. Suddenly, I saw Joe across the street. He gave me a friendly wave. I was petrified with horror. I knew that the light would turn green, and he would come to me. But a bus passed him. A second later, there was no one on the opposite street. I ran as fast as I could. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you. I lay with my eyes closed and pretended that I was suffocating. I don't have enough air. Newt, give me mouth to mouth. Save me. But Newt froze. And his dad suddenly bent over me and began to give me mouth to mouth. I opened my eyes in surprise. It's Newt who should be kissing me, not his dad. Before I could push him away, Newt's mom burst into the hall. She stared in shock at her husband, at me, and shouted, "What the hell is going on here?" Oh no, everything was not going according to plan at all. I was an ordinary orphan, and from the age of 6, I lived in an orphanage. Mom gave me here because she got married and gave birth to a new child. I hated my life. I had no friends among the orphans, and every day I dreamed of returning to my mom. I even searched for her in social networks, but all in vain. But one day, we were taken to the art museum, and there I suddenly noticed her. Mom was standing and holding the hand of a child, about 6 years old. Oh, so this was my little sister. My heart began to beat faster. Mommy, I finally found you. You haven't changed much. We will be together again. I immediately ran up to her and just wanted to hug her, but Mom abruptly retreated. What are you doing, Mom? It's me, your daughter. I came even closer and opened my arms for a hug. But Mom only called the guards and told them to take this homeless girl away from her child. What? The guards took me aside. I struggled, but I saw that Mom and her daughter had already left the museum. They let me go and I fell powerlessly. I've never been so hurt. The other orphans started laughing at me and pointed at me. It couldn't be worse. And then someone shouted at them to stop. I looked around in surprise and crossed eyes with a blue-eyed, tall guy. He helped me up and asked me how I was feeling. Inside, everything seemed to turn upside down. I could barely answer something intelligible. Only then did the guy nod and go to his friends, and I watched him go for a long time. Upon returning to the orphanage, all my thoughts were occupied with the mysterious stranger. I even dreamed about him. No wonder. It was the first time someone had been so kind to me. I dreamed of meeting him again, but I knew that it was impossible. One day, I was looking out at the window, and suddenly I noticed a familiar face. It was that guy. He was wearing a school uniform and was heading to the school opposite. God, this was a sign of fate. Since then, every morning and evening, I watched the guy. I had to meet him. But to do this, I needed to get out of the orphanage, which was strictly prohibited. But for the sake of love, I was willing to take a risk. In my free time, while the teachers were not watching us, I climbed the fence of the orphanage and carefully jumped off. Freedom! I remained to find this guy. I went to the school and immediately started looking for him. He was just standing in the corridor, surrounded by friends. I heard them call him Newt. Newt. What a beautiful name. I resolutely approached him and, smiling, greeted him. But Newt looked at me in disbelief. How could you forget? You picked me up and then we met eyes. Newt still didn't understand, and his friends were laughing at me. At the moment, the bell rang and Newt and his friends went to class, and his friend Oliver pushed me with his shoulder. Oh, I wouldn't give up so easily. Newt was the only person who had been kind to me, and I was ready to do anything to be with him. I was waiting outside for the lesson to end, and then I saw Newt coming out. I wanted to go to him, but he got into the car with his father, who came to pick him up. Newt was leaving. No, I couldn't just lose him. Without thinking twice, I threw myself under Newt's father's car. The impact threw me slightly to the side, but I pretended to remain unconscious. Terrified, Newt and his father picked me up and carried me to the car. His father panicked and decided to take me to their house. I was on my way to Newt's. Hooray! The car stopped. They dragged me and put me on the sofa. Newt's father went to get ammonia, which meant that this was my chance. I was left alone with Newt. I jumped up and pretended that I didn't have enough air. Newt, I needed to give me mouth to mouth. I was hoping that he would come to me and he would kiss me. But Newt stood in a stupor and did not move. But his father, who burst into the hall, immediately began to give me mouth to mouth. I tried to pull away, but I couldn't. At that moment, Newt's mom came into the room. She stared at us in shock and shouted, "What's going on here?" Damn, everything wasn't going to plan. I took a shuddering breath and started coughing. Newt's father explained that I was in a car accident and he was saving my life. Newt's mom immediately apologized for her abruptness, examined me, and said that they needed to call my parents urgently. They were worried. I lowered my gaze and quietly replied, "I am an orphan. I live in an orphanage, and I would so like to have a real family." From my words, Newt's mother seemed to shed tears. She exchanged glances with her husband, and they went into another room. I heard them talking about something. What if it was about me? I told Newt I was going to the bathroom. Staggering, I slowly went to the toilet, and as soon as I locked the door, I immediately leaned against the wall and listened. Newt's mom said that I reminded them of their daughter, whom they lost in an accident. Now she would be the same age as me. I suddenly shuddered. This was a brilliant idea. I needed Newt's parents to adopt me, and then I would be together with him forever. I went back to the living room and waited for Newt's parents. They immediately said that they might miss me in the orphanage, and they had to take me there. No, not now. I had to lie that I was still very dizzy, and we decided to wait it out. This was my chance to please them. I even lied that I could play the piano, sing and dance, but in the orphanage, the teachers punished us. I hugged Newt's mom impulsively and sobbed softly. His parents were touched, but still decided to take me back. The plan didn't work. Newt did come with us, but just wished me luck. It couldn't have ended like this. When I was taken to the orphanage, the teacher met me with shouts. He said that now I would be under house arrest until graduation. I shrank from his screams. And the Newt's parents said that they needed to talk to the director of the orphanage. While they were in the office, I didn't know what to do, and the Newt's parents came into the room. They smiled and happily informed me that I was now their daughter. I almost fainted from happiness. At home, his parents showed me my new room, kitchen, and living room, but I was not interested in all this. My thoughts were occupied with only one thing, Newt. But where was he? His parents said that he was probably walking with a friend. They suggested that I take a break, and I hid in Newt's room instead. I was looking around his room and noticed a framed photo of Newt standing with that disgusting Oliver. Well, soon there would be a photo of me with him. And suddenly I heard footsteps and hid. As soon as the door opened, I jumped out shouting, "Surprise!" But Newt gave a startled cry and asked what I was doing there. I was moving towards him and said that now we were definitely together forever. I reached out to kiss Newt, but at that moment, he ran out. Heck! I heard him yelling at his parents and asking why they adopted me. But the parents gently replied that they always wanted a son and a daughter, and it didn't matter if it was your own child or someone else's, they would love me as much as they loved Newt. Their words warmed my soul, and I suddenly smiled. What good parents Newt had. The next evening, his parents decided to have a family dinner so that we all got to know each other better. At first, Newt sat all tense, but gradually we even started talking. I started telling stories from the orphanage, and Newt was very interested in listening to them. He didn't even know how to live in an orphanage. And then I enjoyed listening to Newt's stories about family trips, and his mother said that I would remember the next trip for the rest of my life. I smiled at her. For the first time, I felt what family was. Newt and I became so close during the evening that I couldn't help but imagine us being a perfect couple. But after dinner, Newt said that he would go meet a friend at the school. It took about 2 hours and Newt still did not return. We were beginning to worry. I told his parents that I would check if everything was in order and immediately rushed to school. But it was empty. My chest ached. What if something happened to him? And then I heard some sounds around the corner. Who was hiding there? Taking a stick, I slowly walked around the corner and just swung. Newt? I couldn't believe my eyes. Newt and Oliver were holding hands and almost kissing. I froze in shock. No, that's not true. And then a branch snapped under my foot. Newt and Oliver looked around in horror. Newt immediately started saying that he would explain everything, but I no longer listened to him and ran home in tears. I slammed the door and threw myself on the bed. Everything I believed was a lie. I started to pack my things and wanted to escape. I didn't need anyone. Then someone knocked. I thought it was Newt and shouted to get out, but instead of him, his mother came into the room. She asked quietly what had happened. I was crying. I was deceived and betrayed again. His mother sighed, came up and quietly said that there were turning points in life. The main thing is to remember that you have a family that will always protect and support you. I sobbed and his mother hugged me tightly and added, I will always be there, no matter what. After this conversation, my heart felt easier. I suddenly felt a strange warmth inside that I hadn't experienced before. I had a real family. Mom, Dad, even a brother. And even if we were not destined to become a couple, we could be best friends. And as for love, apparently you can't get it against your will. The next day, I went to Newt's with sweets, but I found him with Oliver. They were hugging in the room. They noticed me and immediately stopped. But I looked at Oliver and then into Newt's beautiful eyes. I handed him sweets and asked for forgiveness. And then I said that I would not interfere and went to my room. I wasn't angry anymore. I realized that all this time I needed a family, and the main thing was that I found it. This was the love that I had been missing so much. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.